entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper rational. They looked at the data and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, the bold taste of a Southern legend.
I have no issue with transgenders. I do have an issue with athletes who are transgender trying to participate, going from a transition of a man to a woman and now playing with the women. And I will say that. Y'all can try and Dave Chappelle me all y'all want. I am very clear on this. You could be a transgender, you could be the homie. But I'll be damned if a male at birth turns into a female and tries to compete against my daughters. She ain't out there. We out. Don't make this a human rights issue. This is a biological issue. Simple as that.
Sounds simple, right? There's Marcellus Wiley, who posted that video on his Twitter account, and now there's more to it. He's the new podcast host of More to It with Marcellus Wiley on the Dan Patrick Podcast Network, and Marcellus joins us now. Marcellus, that to me is very clear, and Chad and I at the time, we reacted to this, said, hey, this seems like a cut and dry issue. I think the vast majority of Americans agree with exactly what you just said. But why did you feel the need to say it?
First of all, thanks for having me on. Please tell Clay Travis to not be a stranger. You could go from seeing someone every single day to never seeing them at all, but much love. I get it. I needed to say it because that's who I am. For far too long, I've been living in a world that is drifting away from true dialogue, true conversation. And the way I am and around those who I know and those who I love, we discuss everything. Even in disagreement, we have respect for each other. That's the locker room. And that's why physically I dressed up my set as a locker room. That was the last place that I've been where everyone was brutally honest, and we pulled no punches, and we talked about everything. Then we walked out with a common goal and a shared goal despite our differences. So I needed to say it because it's a conversation everyone's having on their own individual islands, in their own silos, in their group text, which is more honest than social media, the group text. But then when it comes to national conversation, mass media, et cetera, we all go silent. And I just knew that this was a conversation that needed to be had. We need to humanize this conversation and remind ourselves everyone involved is a human being. But respectfully, I will not allow my daughters to go and play against a transgender woman. And there's for many reasons, like you said, clear-cut reasons to me, but I understand there's a disagreement out there. That's why I wanted the dialogue.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think some want to make it an argument instead of a dialogue and a conversation, to turn it into anti-trans instead of pro-biological woman, which is what you were trying to get across.
Yeah, it goes that way. I mean, in any conversation, I could say the Jets are going to win. Oh, you think the Patriots suck? And immediately we turn that into something. So imagine when it's something more sensitive than just who you think is going to win a game. I'm used to that. I think I am one of the people that could stand in the middle of a room and grab all four corners and let's discuss this properly. And this is one of those conversations. I won't run from it. I will change my opinion if I get informed knowledge that changes my opinion. Either I learn or unlearn. That's just how I'm built, and that's how I will always approach life. But at the same time, I know what I've been presented with in terms of facts. I also know from playing sports and just being a man, the differences and why there are classifications and differences between the genders and even between age, between weight, etc. I'll give you an example, just to kind of make it simple for everyone, because a lot of times when you talk from this perspective, it seems like you've chosen a side. I coach youth football. I have a 7-year-old son who's amazing. He's a beast. I give him that. And we had a 4-year-old on our team because the 4-year-old and his father wanted to play football, and they wanted me, the former pro, to coach him. I get it. I didn't want to coach the kid. He's too young, but I said I will not deny him the opportunity. My son at 7 knew not to attack this kid, knew not to play too rough with this kid, play too hard with this kid, because this kid wasn't ready for this. Well, being a former professional athlete against men, no matter what transformations you say that you untake, no matter what you say that you have gone through, you don't change the entirety of your body. So this is not an identity conversation, because I have full respect, 100% respect for transgender and identity. You could be a woman, you could be a man. But when it comes to the body, I know that they won't transform every single part of the body composition. Therefore, there will be advantages. Therefore, I had to make that stance.
And I know Jamel Hill came after you a little bit, and some others. And what I hate about this, Marcel, first off, I love that you said it. I love the way that you said it. I agree with it. But even if I disagreed with you, I would respect your right to say it, and then I could disagree with you. I hate how we automatically have to label someone something because they side with one particular side of an issue. And I think Jamel Hill, and there are others that go down this path of, well, don't do that because then you're on this group, right? You're in this half of America, and we're all divided in America. So even if I were to agree with this point on another side, I can't say it because then I'm identified as that half. And I wish we could get back to individuals having their own opinions, thinking them through, and having different opinions on different issues without having to be labeled one thing or another. So I respect you for saying that, even if it does get some blowback from Jamel Hill and others.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Jamel Hill's a friend, and we disagree mightily on certain topics, and obviously we're friends, so we agree on a lot of things as well. I wouldn't let that deter you. I wouldn't let that deter anyone. Let's just start off with me being a former professional football player. There are only 2 responses we get. The third one you don't want, and if it happens, you're not in the league long. You either get cheers or boos. If you get apathy, if they don't care about you, if coach doesn't care, if people don't support you and cheer you, or they say boo and we're trying to dissuade you, then you're in a bad position. So I'm never the one who sees adversity or sees difference as the ultimate of bad. I think that's part of the conversation. Part of my understanding of this conversation, this issue, has come from opposition rounding out my opinion. So you have to be ready to engage with others, no matter who you are, so that you can fully form your opinion. I'm not deterred by that. What I am deterred by is when we start to label people, when we start to all of a sudden turn it into you're against. And Jamel actually brought up a tremendous point that I didn't even think of before I hit send, which was some people are actually hating transgenders. Therefore, they're going to act like they are loving women's rights and women's participation in sports, which is an interesting conversation. How many people purely are against this because they realize that this is just not right and fair, or Or are they really trying to do it in disguise because they really have a deeper issue? Interesting point. But for me, it's not. My daughter went to Glastonbury High School. And if people Google that, in 2017, they dealt with this exact issue. Now, I looked at that from that vantage point and said, I didn't want my daughter to be in anything that wasn't level in terms of opportunity and a playing field. I believe in the meritocracy of sports. I realized through my participation as well that that is being undermined, that's being stripped away. But it's supposed to be merit-based, and it's also based on classifications. By age when you're younger, by weight when you're younger, by gender, the entire process, unless you're at a younger youth level. So the point is, let's just keep those strict, bold lines and classifications in place. Why? Because they've been well thought through, because the biology supports it, and it's the best thing to do in terms of fairness and opportunity. If not, we're going to have issues as we're starting to see percolate all throughout our country.
Look, I have two daughters, so I've started to think about issues like this and, how we would handle that as parents if this came up. And while I agree with everything you're saying on this, the one difficult thing that I have with this is, and there's an example right now with a Christian school basketball team that the Christian school would not allow them to play against transgender athletes, even though whatever district they were in would allow it, so it ended their season. So if my daughter came to me and played her entire life playing basketball, let's say, and it's her senior year and she's got one game left, and I'm saying you're not playing against the transgender athletes on the other team, but she's saying, Dad, I've worked forever to get here, and this is the regional playoff or whatever it may be, and I really want to play in this game. How I would handle that, I don't know the answer to that. But if your daughter came to you and said, Dad, I've competed hard to get here. I really want to give this a go and play in this event, whatever it is, game, whatever it may be. What would your response be?
Oh, my response would be in support of what she wanted. It's the same thing I face all the time when people ask me, is my son going to be allowed to play tackle football? What if he made it to a college, high school level? Would you allow him to play tackle football? And I always say, we're going to have a conversation. It'll probably be 3 hours long at his favorite restaurant. And I would tell him the highs and lows of that experience from my perspective. And if he still wants to do it, I'm always going to co-sign his greatest passions and his endeavors. So you would have to defer to her in that moment. What I did was told my perspective towards what I would do with my youngest two daughters, because my oldest already endured this. Now, my youngest two daughters have not just yet. What is Daddy suggesting? Exactly what I said in the video. What are they suggesting? They're too young to have that conversation just yet. But I will always be open-minded and open to whatever they desire, because they're the ones putting in the work ultimately, and they're the ones trying to serve out their greater passions. That said, also, let's just make sure that we keep this granular as much as it's a global conversation. When it's granular, you have to start to realize, what sport are we talking about? There's a global fairness. Like, it's not fair that someone can potentially set records, rewrite the record book, take away opportunities, scholarships, et cetera. But then there's also a biological conversation of, are we talking mixed martial arts? We've already seen what this happened in mixed martial arts. Are we talking something that is a combat sport? Are we talking about, hey, they're running track, she's going to leave your daughter, she may lose to a transgender woman, fine. But physically, she can survive those moments because it's not a man transitioning to a woman.
Is it a safety issue, basically, is what you're asking, depending on the sport? There's the example of Leah Thomas in swimming. Well, no one's in physical danger. Leah Thomas is just taking down the record books, right? So that's not fair to the other competitors. But in a basketball game, in a softball game, in mixed martial arts, it's different. So you're talking about the safety end of it.
Yeah, that's why this is something to be discussed. I don't want to be the poster man of transgender conversations, but I will always offer my slice of opinion. And if you look at it, opportunities are going to be lost, because If you're saying there's a fairness conversation, scholarships will go to a transgender woman over a natural born woman, right? There's going to be the fact that there is a safety issue in certain sports more than others. There's also going to be a fairness conversation, right? And the reason why this is now bubbling as an issue and we really don't see an end and solve in sight is because we're not really having a conversation openly and respectfully. So people have come back at me and disagreed, and some have come back at with hate speech, which is amazing to me when you say something like I say, and I'm not saying I'm anti anything. People will always return fire like they thought that you were trying to burn them, and I wasn't. I just said in my household, this is the way that I'm going to legislate this. That could be overturned by my kids and their desires and those circumstances. But until that point, this is my stance. I think a large percentage of this world agrees with that stance, but maybe an even larger percentage of this world is scared to say that exact point.
Marcellus Wiley, our guest, the host of More to It on the Dan Patrick Podcast Network. Marcellus, behind you've got the sign Compton to Columbia. Which location has impacted who you are more, Compton or Columbia?
Wow. I've been in media for almost 30 years, and I don't think I've had a harder question. More? Oh, wow. I will say this, because typically my response is the journey from Compton to the Columbia and then from Columbia to the NFL were equally the same distance. Like, what? It just felt that way. I would have to say Compton. Why? Because Compton gave me the experience of living through adversity, the experience of knowing that there's going to be ills around you. There's going to be circumstances that are going to be harmful for you and your greatest ambitions. I learned that the hard way. But that experience also makes me look at any opponent, anything of adversity as something that's just a challenge that can be overcome. And I look at life that way. But Columbia gave me like the realization of my aspiration. Like it told me that dreams can become reality. It was amazing being in classrooms with people who were academically challenging themselves. Like typically where I'm from, people athletically challenge themselves. They were competitive in the classroom. They really believed in themselves. They knew that there were many ways up the mountain, not just sports, not just entertainment. And they really believed they were going to be successful. That was great. But I imagined that before I even got to Columbia. That's why I chose Columbia. But you can't imagine Compton. Like you had to go through Compton. And I'm Compton pre-NWA, before the movies, before the songs, before it became something that was socialized and glamorized. I really went through those hardships. So that experience I hold on to keenly. And that's why I can look at any situation like this one, talking about transgenders, et cetera. And I remind myself, I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been on both sides of a conversation. I will always have respect and reach out for someone who is different than me.
Is that where you got your nickname, Dat Dude, which has followed you through your career, or is that post-Compton?
No, that happened in San Diego with the Chargers. Long story short, teammates, they kept saying, man, you're that dude. And there was a rapper at the time, Devin the Dude, who was one of my favorite rappers. They tried to make a play of words on it, but basically that dude is the old lady who goes to the game with her husband and she's like, baby, who's that dude down there running around making all those plays? Or they said it was the girl at the bar at the club who was like, ooh, girl, who's that dude that just walked in? So they basically said I'm everywhere doing everything. So they were like, you're that dude. And I took it because I loved it.
Marcellus Wiley has been our guest. Hey, final thing, authenticity means a lot to you. That's why you're now with the podcast, doing the podcast you're doing. Same reason we're here with Outkick. What are you allowed to do, or I guess anything you would like to do, versus the structure and hierarchy you were under at previous stops?
Yeah, I've always been a guy who talked sports, but it was really a guys for life conversations. I never liked third and goal conversations. My first job was NFL Network. Then I'm at ESPN. I'm on NFL Live. And to just be honest, I didn't love doing those jobs. Why? Because I didn't love like the mundane detail of a goal line play. What I loved was the players. What I loved was the person that became the player when he put his helmet on. What I loved was the emotional content of those moments. What I loved was what fans couldn't understand and what I was blessed to translate to them. So I always looked at our typical sports programming like, one, we're talking a lot of Cowboys, now a lot of LeBron, and kind of like the same topics recycled. But two, we didn't go deep enough. And when we went deep, that was flexing my muscles, but not necessarily according to the business model. So I understood that there was going to be a time and place where we were going to come to head. And I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to go wider. And I think they want to stick to what works. Duh. So instead of bastardizing and instead of talking bad about it, instead of just like trying to drive it into the ground, I realized that my time came. If I could do it the way I wanted to do it and really follow my greatest passions, that I'll be more successful and I will have more fun doing it. And so far, so great. It's been amazing because I still talk in general those topics, but I'm able to go into tangents and go and annex it and really bring on next level conversations off the same topic. So that's the most fun I've had in this industry since I first got into it, and my eyes were big, and obviously I didn't know what I was doing. But now I'm in a great place, man, and you have to be authentic. That's the only freedom you really have in this world. That's why I challenge everyone to speak your mind. And yes, there's going to be opposing headwinds, but continue to respectfully speak your mind. Because if not, you get boxed in. We know how this world is turning. We know how PC is becoming. You just got to go along and say what everyone wants to hear in pleasantries. That's not enlightening and that's not empowering. That's why I won't be one of those who do that.
If you put that video about transgender athletes out while working at ESPN, would you have been called into a meeting shortly after that?
I mean, that's a huge hypothetical. I had controversial takes when I was at ESPN. What I will say is when the backdrop of you is already assumed to be one way. So at ESPN, everyone assumed liberal.
Yeah.
At Fox, everyone assumed conservative, right?
Yep.
So if you say something conservative at ESPN, which I did before, no one really noticed because they were like, it just blended in with all the other liberal talk. But when I said something conservative at Fox, they were like, see, that's who he is. That's why he's there. That's what it is. And it's almost like the hammer doubles down. So I think context matters. I think co-host matters. I took a lot of collateral damage and hits from my co-hosts and their opinions and vice versa. So you're in that team dynamic where it's not just what you say, it's who are you around saying it, and then where are you saying it? What I love about the podcast is I don't have to hear any of that. You got to listen to exactly what I said. Imagine, I would say this to your question. This is the point. If I would have had that same take on a network show at ESPN, the problem wouldn't have been ESPN. Is that I will be with other co-hosts who now are being brand conscious. And maybe they are being PC. Maybe they will pander, or maybe they will speak their mind and we can have an open dialogue. But the point is a lot of variables at play. So you don't get the pure intent and the pure perspective of my content in those places. But here you do. You can hear every word, every syllable, every breath I take, and you know where I'm coming from.
More to It with Marcellus Wiley is the podcast to check out. Marcellus, great visit, man, and we appreciate the time today.
Yeah, keep up the great work. Thank you.
All right, guys. Keep it going, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Marcellus Wiley there. Twitter handle's easy, just his name. And again, More to It with Marcellus Wiley. You can check that out on the Dan Patrick Podcast Network. Stay tuned. More coming here on the Outkick Network. This is Outkick 360.
As a pitcher, there's nothing I loved more. There was nothing that I relished more than a one pitch out. that was like a gift from God as a pitcher, because I had this game plan. I got to get a hitter out. I got to work this count. I got to do these things. You give me a 1 pitch out, and then I didn't like to face guys like you for this reason. I don't want to have to use 7, 8, 9 pitches to get an out. I don't want, and that was the Tony Gwynn thing. You had the strike zone, but you knew the strike zone. And so, my forte, you show me a guy that strikes out 100 times, I can show you a guy I can get out pretty easily because he's got holes. You show me a guy that gets on base 40% of the time, and I'm going to have a little bit of a concern. And you mentioned something that I think tails into the discussion we're going to have today. I worked quick, and so people have asked me about the pitch clock, and I said the pitch clock will never affect a pitcher that sucks, because good pitchers work fast. And if you saw Scherzer yesterday, it was hilarious. He struck a guy out who was backing out of the batter's box. I mean, but that's what we did. Tempo was part of my game. That was part of it's a weapon, and hitter, and not being able to. And I'm wondering, because you were a guy that took time in at bats. You could make a 10-pitch at bat go a while. How are hitters going to have to adjust now? You can only get out of the box one time. You got to be in the. The tempo is going to be a lot quicker. Good or bad for hitters?
Bad. I mean, look. I mean, you're talking to a guy. Okay, remember. So when I let off the game on the road, okay. At that moment in time, I controlled everything.
Right.
So when we used to play Atlanta, okay, in Atlanta, I used to take a long sweeping walk, bro, and stop right in front of Ted Turner and Jane Fonda, and stare right into Jane Fonda's eyes, and I'd say some things that I shouldn't say on here, but that was tradition, and people would be yelling, "Get in the box, get in the box," and I'd be like, you know what I'd say.
Yep.
And you don't get voted the most hated player in the league 5 years in a row without doing these kind of things.
Right.
But I was voted the most hated player in the league because I made the other people's jobs hard.
Yep.
See, like I say, remember our team? Like I see you talking to the other teammate, we're fighting.
Yeah.
Like, well, we're playing for real money here.
Right.
Like, and the thing about it is, and that's why when you pitched, you were so prepared, took it so serious. You carry it out to the field too. Don't forget, when you're out there in the field and you got a guy, I don't want to use people's names.
Guy going 3-2 on everybody, and no, I get that, and that was part of that too, Lenny. I learned on that team because it was a veteran team, and I was a younger guy. Listen, when we're playing in St. Louis and it's 165 degrees on the turf, I need to get my players off the field. And so that became because I always wanted, and as I got older and became more in charge of my defense, I always wanted guys invested in the day I pitched.
Thanks to Marcellus Wiley for joining us. Outkick 360 rolls on. Coming up in an hour, Clay Travis will be with us. Right now, the very latest on the Jalen Carter situation. 2 misdemeanor warrants issued today out of Athens for one of the top players in the NFL draft, Jalen Carter out of Georgia, stemming from racing. And Chad, this goes back to the January 15th crash that took the life of a former teammate of Carter's and a staff member at Georgia as well. With the latest, Mike Griffith joins us from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Dog Nation. Mike, thank you for the time. Hope things are well.
Yeah, it's obviously been a busy day. I mean, it started with Nolan Smith shedding tears for the teammate you referenced, Devin Willock, killed in that tragic accident, along with Chandler LaCroix, the young lady that worked in the recruiting department. The driver also killed. Tragic accident. And as more details come out, more sadness and disappointment in the Georgia football fan base for sure.
AJC has been on top of it with further details, diving into where Carter was versus what he told the officer originally. The changing storyline to me is the question that needs to be asked as to why he originally said he was a mile away and heard the crash, and then later said that he was actually side by side with the vehicle that crashed.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the AJC investigative team is done a very thorough investigation. And to be honest with you guys, it wasn't real popular as they delved into the details and pushed for more information. And, we're in a society now, and I've said this before, where, the Burger King generation, everybody kind of wants the news delivered their way, and fan bases don't want to hear negative things. And sometimes the media becomes targets as they try to investigate and learn details that maybe aren't favorable. But when these sort of details come out, there is a level of accountability that might not be there otherwise. And certainly what the AJC's done in their investigation, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, their investigative team, Chip Towers as well, the work that they've done diligently has shed light on this. And as sad as it is, there will be a level of accountability that I think will, moving forward, other programs around the country will have to open their eyes. And not to necessarily the details of, being out late. We know that's a bad thing. We saw the toxology reports of the young lady. Obviously, that was also very disappointing, more than twice the legal limit in terms of being intoxicated. Very disappointing. But the type of car, this is where I'm going to take it here. And maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's not fair. But, Jalen Carter is driving a Jeep Trailhawk. This is a car that's capable of going 180 miles per hour, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, as part of an NIL deal. Now, listen, I understand NIL, and I understand the students' rights to capitalize and take advantage off of their name, image, and likeness. And certainly, that was long overdue. The NCAA leadership dropped the ball on that. But instead of maybe pursuing 2 female basketball players at Miami making money, maybe they need to look a little bit closer at some of these NIL dealings and try to provide some sort of structure and educate. Because to me, the NCAA is far, far behind, and these programs are also far behind in managing many of these unintended consequences. Guys, Jalen Carter was pulled over in September going over 80 miles an hour in a 45 and was issued a citation. And when media reports that, they get shouted down and canceled. It's a kid, it's making a mistake. Listen, that was a red flag then. Why wasn't it dealt with more seriously then? Could that have prevented Carter being arrested? And now on the day of his dreams, the day that he's supposed to show up for an NFL interview and start to realize his lifetime dreams, all the hard work, an arrest warrant is issued back in Georgia, and he could not meet with the media. This is a terrible public stage of embarrassment for Georgia football today.
And well said, Mike. And I'm not trying to insinuate that all of Georgia football is turning the streets of Athens into Fast and Furious or anything. But if I see something like this, I don't think, boy, this is the first time that guys have raced, especially given the citation that you mentioned with Jalen Carter before. We've been dealing with the Brandon Miller fallout and how Nate Oates and Alabama mishandled this. Obviously, Jalen Carter's not under Kirby Smart's purview right now, but he did release a statement about how they're going to look into this and, take everything seriously. Knowing Kirby Smart, do you feel like he is going to take this seriously and look into it and make sure, hey, this isn't something that's going on with other players where they're out racing each other on the streets and doing something dangerous like this?
Yeah, well, what needs to happen and what will happen, just based on my history with Kirby, I remember a few springs ago, there were 6 players arrested in 6 weeks. Now, the offenses were, not answering to a parking ticket. Certainly nothing of this level, nothing of this, nothing of this tragic nature. But 6 arrests in 6 weeks put Kirby just over the top that particular spring, and he had some of the guys running stairs. This is like what 1950s punishment. He had guys running stairs in front of a group of boosters that were there to watch a scrimmage, which is about as much public humiliation as I think any young people could stand in today's day and age. So when Kirby makes his mind up that something's going to end, it's going to end. I mean, listen, Kirby Smart, the thing that everyone I think probably understands, all you got to do is look at the Coach of the Year awards. Listen, I'm here to tell you, I've been covering college football 30 years. And Kirby Smart did one of the most masterful jobs building a program in history. The fact that he was able to win back-to-back games in an era where there's a 4-team playoff is not going to be repeated anytime soon. The difficulty is just remarkably hard. But Kirby's not out here to make friends. And you saw that he didn't win many Coach of the Year awards. I can't think of one that he won, even though he was probably very deserving. But it's because of that nature. It's because Kirby's not out there to make friends with the media or try to win people over. I will say this, though. He's got a passion and a love for Georgia as a Georgia graduate himself, that he recognizes the black eye that this program has been dealt by these recent events. And it doesn't stop with Jalen Carter. Stetson Bennett getting arrested was humiliating. And the details came out on that today as well on DogNation.com. Javon Bullard was the defensive MVP. Earlier in the season, he missed a game on a kind of a DUI. These are leaders. These are kids atop the program. Kirby Smart is no fool. He realizes that the direction must change if Georgia has any shot at a repeat. The biggest hurdle is not going to be some new offensive coordinator. It's going to be accountability and knocking down this sense of entitlement that's crept into the program.
Mike Griffith with us, Dog Nation reporter. So what's the most surprising detail that came out about Stetson Bennett to you? Was it just banging on doors and claiming he didn't have a cell phone, or the fact that we discussed this, he didn't go to the Senior Bowl to meet with teams in the same week he's, charged with public intoxication in Dallas?
Yeah, just putting himself in that situation, being alone at that time of night in a city of that size. I don't know all the details, guys. I can't think of any good circumstances that would put someone alone in a neighborhood at that time, knocking on doors without a cell phone. I can't think of a good scenario to say, well, that explains it. But unfortunately, Stetson struck me as, even in the postseason celebration when he said, to DJ Shockley, one of the Georgia greats, who actually had paid Stetson a compliment, calling him the greatest of all time, and DJ gave him a chance to thank the crowd, and Stetson instead said, y'all burned us. You doubted us. DJ, now a member of the media, and turned to the crowd and said, people doubted us and nobody believed, and it just wasn't the kind of speech that you would expect. You would expect someone to say, I just want to thank the fans, and I want to thank my teammates, and I want to thank my coaches. And instead he said it was the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. It was just the opposite. And I thought, where is all this anger coming from? Because Stetson Bennett was celebrated like few other quarterbacks, guys. The media really propped Stetson up. There's a Heisman Trophy vote, and I think there's over 900 people that vote, and most of them, almost all of them, are media members. So the media wasn't down on Stetson. The media made him a Heisman Trophy finalist. He wasn't even first-team All-SEC, according to the coaches. So the anger was misplaced. It's part of who Stetson is. Listen, he's a resilient guy. He's a guy that stays motivated. And it's almost as if Stetson wanted to put himself back in this underdog role. Because guess what? He's an underdog now. NFL teams don't want to draft a backup quarterback that's going to have any sort of off-field issues or attitude problems. The Stetson Bennett that shows up here on Friday is going to be, and I believe this, I could be wrong, but I believe it's going to be a different guy than the one that got arrested in Dallas. If that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what is.
Well, it better be. And we had the director of the Senior Bowl on, Mike, and he said a lot of what you're saying now, that the biggest question and the reason they're disappointed that he wasn't there was so many teams want to know if Stetson Bennett can be a great backup quarterback in the NFL. Can you do the things necessary to play for a long time, but be a backup, be a good teammate, show up, have some humility, help out the starter? And he said that's the biggest question mark around him. And the fact that he blows off the Senior Bowl and goes to Dallas and gets arrested, I don't think helped his case. I also don't think it helps his case in the details of that arrest, that he hid from the cops and had to be cuffed because he hid from the cops when he first saw them when they pulled up. Also not a great detail for him.
Yeah, not the accountability that most Georgia players have. And you're right, Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, former Super Bowl scout with the Patriots. And Jim knows the game. Jim understands. Stetson was in Texas training. That's why he was there, going to a quarterback. And who knows? I don't want to second guess it too much because from a strategic standpoint, let's be honest, we don't know how Stetson Bennett would have looked standing side by side thrown against some of these other quarterbacks. He wasn't the most consistent guy with his accuracy. He was very timely and very clutch. Certainly the mobility was amazing. A lot of his magic happened at the line of scrimmage before the snap. Very good football IQ, able to put his team in the right play. But side by side in quarterback drills, I'm not sure that's his strength. I believe that was a calculated absence. I don't think it was the attitude that, I don't have anything else to prove. I think Stetson knows his strengths and weaknesses. I think that his agents know that as well. So I'm not as down on that. But I do want to turn the page just for a little sidebar, because not all is negative. As tough a day as this was for Georgia football, one of the people who was there at the Senior Bowl performing was Warren McClendon. Now, more details have come out from the AJC about this accident with the Ford Expedition and hitting the brick building. And I actually went to the crash site. And let me tell you, it was very morbid. There were still auto parts. For some reason, I thought when there was a crash that the police cleaned up or someone was there to take all these parts away. They weren't. Fenders and rearview mirrors and items from within the car and lighters and just things like that. And you're just thinking, oh my gosh, you could, there were blood. It was an absolutely morbid scene 5 days after. And the reason this vehicle was believed to have hit the wall over 80 miles per hour, according to the report, the speedometer was broke at over 80 miles per hour. Warren McClendon was sitting in the front seat of that vehicle that hit the brick wall at 80 miles an hour. Less than 3 weeks later, he was out there at the Senior Bowl taking snaps. Not only that, he was standing in front of the media answering questions, accountable for that night. Not anyone else. He was the first Georgia figure. Warren McClendon, who was in the passenger seat, was the first Georgia person to answer questions about this in a pub. And I'm not talking about issuing statements. You guys are in the media. We know what issued statements means. That's garbage. That's not accountable. That's chicken, what, okay? But Warren McClendon's down there as a grown man that's not going to allow this wreck to get between him and his dream. And there he is. You see the interview. Now, some people bash the media. How could you ask him about that? Well, let me tell you what happened. Warren McClendon, DJ Shockley was there, as well as Zach Klein from WSB2. And these professionals asked Warren in advance, do you want to do this interview? Warren wanted to do the interview. This kid's smart. He knew he was going to be asked about this by all the NFL teams that were there in Mobile. He knew that he'd be requested every day. So on the very first day, he did that interview and answered those questions, got it out of the way, and he's kept his head down. He's been working. He's here at the Combine now. I believe he's a walking miracle. And this kid is just impressed. He comes from a military family, impressed me so much that he was that accountable. Listen, the guys that you're seeing run afoul, that's not what wins championships, okay? There is a lot of other really good character kids that have taken Georgia to this level. And I think a few right now have hurt the program's image, But I think overall, Kirby's recruited a lot of great leaders. And I think this summer he's going to call on those leaders to step it up at Georgia, because things have got to change after these horrible details have come out.
Great stuff, Mike. Mike Griffith from Dog Nation, and covering all the Georgia headlines, which leads right now with Jalen Carter. Great perspective. We appreciate the visit.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, there's Mike Griffith there. Always a great visit with him.
I was going to get into this with him, but, I know he doesn't know what makes law enforcement make decisions when they do, but it just can't be a coincidence that these arrest warrants are issued hours before he's going to take the podium at the NFL Combine, and he turns right around and heads out of Indy back to Athens when this happens. It just seems like too crazy of a coincidence that the warrants were issued today, right?
Yes.
But also I sit back and think, well, what does that benefit the Athens Police Department to do that? I don't know that they would care or should care. It's just odd timing that he was going to be at the podium today.
Yeah, I mean, that's the storyline, because everyone thinks he's going to speak, and then he's not. He said
now,
back
again,
to
it's
Athens
also
now.
not on the Athens PD to wait, let's wait until the kid's done with the Combine, and then we'll put out the warrant. They put it out when they put it out, right? It's just odd timing that it all happened today before he was set to speak.
And Mike's right about McClendon surviving this. There was another passenger behind him that also survived, 4 in the vehicle total, and just going through and going off of telephone poles and then
thinking about hitting that wall at 80 miles per hour.
After going through a couple trees as well. Awful. And he's right. He's a walking miracle. Coming up, Tua Tagovailoa, and whether or not the Dolphins are going to pick up the 5th-year option on their quarterback. They seem like they're bringing him back and he's their guy, but can they be sure? We'll discuss next on Outkick 360.
Yeah, man, thanks for coming on. And so much to talk about. And I kind of just want to dive right in as somebody I watch your show, and these are conversations that you have had in the past couple of months. And, NIL is such a game changer when it comes to different aspects of college sports. And we're starting to see that influx when it comes to boosters, people around the program, how schools are navigating. Before we get into like the inner wellings of it, what's been your thoughts on how this has played out over the last 2 years?
Is an implosion waiting to happen. Kind of what I said a few years before it started. I came on someone, I think I was on McAfee when I said about 3 years ago, I'm like, listen, the NIL should not be conducted this way. It should not be formatted this way. It should not be constructed this way or created this way. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's going to end up imploding college football, and it will be the end of junior college. It'll be the end of high school recruiting. It'll be the end of a lot of this stuff compiled with transfer portal. So I say you put these two things together, you're gonna kill JUCO, which 3 years later, right now to this day, we just had our second California JUCO fold. Kansas JUCOs are not doing well at all. Mississippi is not doing well at all. Resource-wise, you're not going to have the resources you once have. You've already seen the entire state of Arizona lose junior college football. So you're having this influx that people don't realize that has a direct impact just from the correlation of these things. And people don't really look into it deep because they just want to see what's on the surface. They only look through the optical lens of things. They don't really dive into anything. And it blows my mind that we're in this analytical world and we don't look into the data and the analytics. We just want to talk on Twitter because all people on Twitter know all things, right? So when I'm sitting there talking and I'm sitting there looking into it and I'm like, well, look, what they should have did was, by the way, a good friend of mine growing up with Ed O'Bannon, he's the one that started this whole thing with the NCAA NIL deal. We played high school basketball together, and Charles and Ed, and he started this thing, and it's crazy, right? It's a slap in the face. NCAA, we already know what that stands for, non-caring assholes of America. They basically pay everybody like $11, right? 100,000 people get paid like $11. Oh, we won. Well, you didn't really win. You created this NIL deal, which basically is for the 1%ers, Trey. 1%ers.
Yeah.
Think about it. Everyone thinks on the outside looking in that these kids are getting millions. No, 1%, if that, I would actually say 0.001% is actually getting the millions. The rest of the percentage, the 99.9% of the kids are average NIL dollar. I don't know if you know what it is, but it's $300.
Glad you're with us as we broadcast from 6th and Peabody in downtown Nashville with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine across the Outkick Network. Coming up in about 30 minutes, Clay Travis joins us on the show. Looking forward to that conversation. We'll dive into Jalen Carter and much more later this afternoon. Chad, a couple of discussion points going on in Indianapolis, not concerning rookies. T. Higgins is eligible for a contract extension this offseason. This rings a lot to me like A.J. Brown from a year ago because he's coming off of back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He's had 2 of those. You've got a situation where he believes he's a number 1 guy, and you have Duke Tobin, their general manager, saying, I'm not in the business of making other teams better. If you want a wide receiver, go find your own because we want to keep the guys that we have. The problem with that is their roster and the way their offense is built, they're going to pay Jamar Chase a year from now, after year 3 when he's eligible. And Joe Burrow is also about to make bank. So what is T. Higgins worth to Cincinnati compared to what he will be worth to another team as a number 1 guy? That's a huge decision for them, and they're trying to do it 1 more year before they have to pay one, if not both, of the other guys. Who knows if they do it with Burrow this offseason?
I do love what Duke Tobin said, though, about T. Higgins, and said, ours basically is not for sale. If you want a receiver, go find your own.
Yeah, that's their problem if they need a wide receiver.
Yeah, not our issue. Go find your own receiver. He's ours. You bring up the important questions, though, about T. Higgins and where they're going to allocate for him as a number 2 guy that could be a number 1 for someone else. Boy, it is a luxury, though, right now.
Yeah.
To have Chase and Higgins on that roster for Joe Burrow.
Can you get Higgins to sign an extension that's more in line with a number 2 wideout? Again, he was about 100 yards short his rookie season. He would have had 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. He had 900 yards his first season.
The answer is no. I mean, I don't see any way. I feel like we're past the point, especially of a young guy. I mean, if T. Higgins is 9-10 years into his career and he wanted to stick around a place he really liked to try to go win a Super Bowl, then maybe, he takes less than what he could get on the open market as a number 1 guy. But I just don't see any way that T. Higgins would knowingly sign on with Cincinnati for number 2 receiver money if he knows he's going to get number 1 receiver money out on the open market. And we both believe that he will. So I think this is heading towards he's going to be out of Cincinnati.
So in Miami, Tua Tagovailoa he's going into the final year of his rookie contract, the final guaranteed season. And then they have a 5th-year option for him in 2024 for around $23, $24 million. Their deadline to decide this is May 1st, so they've got some time to determine what they're going to do. But they have not made a decision one way or the other yet on the 5th-year option for Tua Tagovailoa. And I don't know how you pick that up based on how this season went with the head trauma, the concussions, and it took a month for him to get out of a concussion protocol at the end of the season when it was all said and done. I mean, just the business side of it, it's not fair to Tua with the concussion. The business side of it, I couldn't pay and guarantee him $24 million a year from now.
Isn't no answer on that or no decision on that a no decision at this point if you're Miami?
I think so.
I always just feel like the 5th-year option deal is kind of a no-brainer when it's exercised. And if there's ever any waffling on whether or not to pick up that option, the answer is no. I think we know our answer right now with Miami, and it's no, and it's for all the reasons that you mentioned. There's no way you could have faith, right, that because of the injury issues now with Tua, that he's your long-term guy if you're the Dolphins. I totally get it on their end.
Chris Greer, the GM, it's not something that's going to make us afraid to do something long-term with him. He's been banged up, but he always comes back and bounces back and plays hard. Excited for his future, watching him do all the work he's been doing in the offseason to prepare for 2023. Mike McDaniel, the head coach, echoed that by saying, I think it's important to recognize that we have a congruence of interests by the Dolphins and the player, and we both want him to play at a very high level for a long time for the Miami Dolphins. I think he's got to prove it for one more year.
Congruence of interest.
Stay healthy. John Morant news next.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, whoa, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Come on. Live a little.
Welcome into Outkick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader.
I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life.
ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live.
Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll 'em, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, the bold taste of a Southern legend.
Clay Travis joins us in 20 minutes. Glad you're with us for Outkick 360. And just like that, the final hour is here.
Just like that. Almost made it.
Rolling through. We've got some headlines involving Lamar Jackson, Daniel Jones, and more. And there has been a string of incidents now with Ja Morant, one of the brightest stars in the NBA. Top-selling jersey, shoe deal, everything's going for him. And everything off the court signals trouble. And the Washington Post, with the story today, last summer, in an encounter that has not been previously reported, the head of security at a Memphis mall told police that Morant, quote, threatened him during an altercation in the parking lot. He was alarmed enough to file a police report. A member of Morant's group shoved the director in the head. This is all what the director of security told police. No arrests were made. Records indicate nothing was filed beyond that. 4 days after that, Morant repeatedly punched a teenage boy in the head during a pickup basketball game at Morant's house. This is coming from the victim, the teenage boy, telling this to police. Morant and his friend struck the 17-year-old so hard they knocked him to the ground and left him with a large knot on the side of his head, according to the police report narrative written by deputies who said they observed the injuries. And you're seeing this. There are other reports of a civil suit that's popped back up where the kid, and I don't know if he's 18 now or not, the teenage boy at 17 at the time, and his mom have filed a suit against Morant. And Chad, this is just, this is turning into just another day in the life and saga of Ja Morant.
I mean, look, fool me once, right? And fool me twice, and now fool me 3, fool me 4 times. He's got the very public incident where They've got the laser pointer on Indiana Pacers players with his entourage, where they thought they were having a gun pointed at him after an altercation during a game. Eventually, you are who you hang out with all the time, right? So John Morant might be a great guy, whatever, but we're getting more and more evidence that he now is his entourage, his dad, whoever else he's keeping around him, and this entourage is bringing him way down. Now, the incident with the pickup game at his house, that's old news, but there's a little bit more detail involved in this report, one of which is that the 17-year-old kid who was punched. Now, Morant told the police officers when discussing this case that I swung first, but he threw a basketball at me, so I consider that the first punch. But then he swung on him. He didn't deny doing that. Now, this is where it gets a little bit hairy. The 17-year-old said that Morant then went into his house, came out with a gun tucked in his shorts, and was showing him the gun.
Flashed it to him.
And then detectives, when they were talking to Morant, brought that part of the story up, but did not ask Morant if it were true. They did not ask him a question about it. That's disturbing. The Pacers story, disturbing. The thing with the mall cop is just silly, just dumb. I can't come up with any defense of Morant or his crew. His mom got into an altercation with someone at a shoe store in the mall and called Morant, who shows up with 9 dudes to the mall. He's asked to leave. They're in the parking lot. He's getting into it with a security guard, and someone in Morant's posse pie faces the guy and shoves him in the head. And then Morant says, I want to know when you get off work, and said it in a way that was threatening, like, I'm going to kill you whenever you get off work. So that guy wanted to call the cops on it because he saw it as a threat. This is bad news, man. I mean, this is bad stuff. This is no longer just, the first one I heard from, friends of mine in Memphis that would say, the kid is a problem. The 17-year-old kid is a known problem. Him and his family had to get out of town after that. So that one's not on Morant. Okay. You can explain one of these things away, right? And you may be right in saying that. But when you pile these things one after the other, and I know it's easier said than done to distance yourself, especially from family, when it's his dad involved in some of this, or your buddies from school or whatever, he's got to do some of that. If he wants to turn this around, he has got to distance himself from the crew he's hanging with. If he doesn't, it's only going to be something more severe eventually that he's going to be involved in.
And then the deal with the Pacers, that the NBA says they investigated that, and that they did not corroborate any individual threatened others with a weapon from the allegations that stem from the Grizzlies-Pacers game. The incidents involving players and law enforcement, they take the allegations of inappropriate conduct seriously. But then, so that all happens, and then you have further details of all this, and you have his agent, Jim Tanner, who says that the recent allegations are unsubstantiated rumors and gossip, and that they were put out by people motivated to tear Ja down and tarnish his reputation for their own financial gain. And the Washington Post has in here the details that the boy and his mother filed a lawsuit against Morant over the incident. And the existence of the suit, which is under seal, was reported earlier this year through TMZ. The details also include with the basketball being thrown at him, and then the teenager coming up to him as if he wanted to fight, in a threatening posture, I guess.
Well, why is a teenager at your house playing a pickup game that fights you? I'm thinking big picture here. If I'm John Morant's agent or I'm an advisor to him, I'm thinking, dude, you are an NBA superstar making millions. Don't let some 17-year-old kid into your house that might throw a basketball at your head. If you're going to play pickup and you're John Morant in the offseason, guys play pickup all the time. That's fine. If you're going to get a run in, you can do it in your home court. That's cool. But do it with people that you trust and know. Don't bring in some 17-year-old kid capable of starting a fight with you that you end up punching, that you're allegedly flashing a gun to. I mean, what are we doing here? Like, if you're going to do that, you better make sure it's people you know and trust that aren't going to undercut you, that aren't going to get into a fight, that aren't going to take things personally, that have your best interest in mind. Maybe it's mutually assured destruction. Maybe it's other players in the team. Whoever it is, get people in you trust. It's just odd to me that you brought in a 17-year-old kid to your home, played him in a pickup game, and it ends in you punching him repeatedly and reportedly flashing a gun at him.
Yeah, well, and then in the actual report, you have the detective who's quoting the teenager, saying that he came outside with his gun. It was tucked into his pants. He didn't pull it out, but the boy said he saw Morant put his hand on it. And then the quote to police in this report says, quote, his dad was yelling at him like, no, go back in the house, yelling that to Morant. Again, this is happening right in front of us, and I don't see anyone stepping in to do anything about it.
No.
Or trying to.
No.
Trying to intervene.
And you got his agent, it's these unsubstantiated reports and there's people that are trying to bring him down. And there's got to be someone. Here's the biggest problem that I see with all this. One, the whole thing that I brought up about, know who you have in your house playing pickup basketball with you to where things like this don't happen. That's just really dumb to me. He's not at the Melrose Y playing a pickup game and gets into a fight with someone that he doesn't know.
I don't get the sense that it's the visitors or whoever they are that are the issue.
No,
Wherever Morant goes, there's something going on.
To me, this also hints at a bigger judgment issue with him.
Yeah.
I'm saying this all stems from the same thing. What are you doing bringing people in your house? Again, a knowledgeable advisor to John Morant would say, you can't just bring anyone into your home for pickup and this stuff happens. It needs to be someone you trust. Also, don't get hurt playing pickup or get into a fight playing pickup. You're John Morant. You're not the guy trying to hold on to his high school hopes and dreams playing John Morant in a pickup game. I mean, give me a break. The biggest problem is the guy who should be in his ear giving him some knowledge is his dad, and his dad is too busy fighting Shannon Sharp courtside. That's a problem.
Yeah, and
his dad is the issue.
And 2 weeks after the fight that took place on this basketball court at his house, Morant and his family filed a police report about how that teenager allegedly said he would, quote, come back and light the place up like fireworks. Again, storyline after storyline, incident after incident. And it's not all Ja, but it's involved with his group. And all I see are quotes about unsubstantiated rumor and gossip, or, hey, we looked into this and there's nothing to actually corroborate that there was a weapon present.
Yeah.
And the question is anyone going to step in and try to do something about it? Or even if he's not willing to listen, I just don't see anything publicly stating that the league, the team, or anyone is doing anything about it instead of just reporting the next incident that's going to come up.
Is the word crew now considered racist?
Crew?
I literally just tweeted a link to the show and I said, John Morant needs to distance himself from his crew. And someone responded and put crew in quotations. And I just looked it up. The definition of crew is a group of people working closely together. And I said, yeah, crew. Here's the Webster's definition of it.
Yeah.
But whoever sent this back is insinuating that I guess that because I'm saying crew, that's now a racist term.
I mean,
that's
exactly how to describe it.
We need a thesaurus, of sorts to put out there to make sure that we don't use any words that have been used for years in the English language that now somehow has been adopted as some sort of racist rhetoric or language. I'm sorry, but crew is not racist. And I'll repeat, John Morant needs to separate from his crew.
Yes.
He brought 9 dudes to a damn Foot Locker to fight some manager. It's not what you want to be hanging out with. Some guy pie-faced pie-faced Paul Blart at the mall in the parking lot. You're John Morant. You're a millionaire. Like, can someone go and slap this kid and say, stop it. The world is yours. The city of Memphis is yours. Stop bringing 17-year-olds into your house that's threatening to shoot the place up that you're forced to punch after they throw a basketball in your face. Stop pointing lasers at the Indiana Pacers basketball team with your crew. Get your dad out of jawing matches with Shannon Sharp and start playing basketball and eliminate everything else. That's what's in the best interest of his crew and family too. You want this guy to be
He's insulated by them.
Your meal ticket forever? Let him continue to make contracts that make you generational wealth and continue to pay all of your bills, which I'm sure he's doing. Because they all, again, work closely together according to the Webster's definition of the word crew. I'm sure they all have some sort of job. It's like he's got his own turtle, from Entourage back in the day. I'm sure someone drives him. Someone picks up his laundry. He's got someone for every possible job. Get rid of someone's the guy who goes to the Foot Locker, to fight the manager. Yeah. They all have their roles. I'm saying eliminate those roles. Separate from these guys. That's the next step.
You mentioned Shannon Sharpe. Brandon Marshall was on Shannon Sharpe's podcast recently, and did he break some news by congratulating Aaron Rodgers on retirement?
So I want to be the first to say salute to Aaron Rodgers for a phenomenal career. You're one of the greatest. Me personally, you're my favorite quarterback ever. Favorite. Aaron Rodgers. Congratulations on a phenomenal career. You won a Super Bowl. Hell, I've never even made it to the playoffs. You should be proud, bro. Your name and your team, that team, is forever sketched in the history of the NFL. Your kids is going to be able to see that. You won back-to-back MVPs. I think you won 3 MVPs. You're phenomenal. It's okay to walk away, bro. There's nothing else left to prove. Go travel the world. Go explore. Go build your family.
There's Brandon Marshall. And so he's filming something. Speaking of Rodgers, he's filming something. Many thought he was going to be on with McAfee yesterday. That was not the case. But he did go on a podcast that's circulating today, the Aubrey Marcus podcast released earlier. And he says he promises it's not going to be a decision that's going to take much longer for him to decide. The quote from Rodgers in response to the discussion from the Combine, from Gutekunst to anyone, quote, "It's best for anybody who has an interest to make a decision sooner rather than later." He says, you know, the team says they feel good about conversations. Rodgers says, I feel good about the conversations that are going to be had and have been had with the important people in my life, yourself included, that helped orient me. But I'm not looking for somebody to tell me what the answer is. All the answers are right inside me. And I've touched on many of them, and definitely the feelings on both sides during the darkness, and I'm thankful for that time. During the darkness.
All the answers are inside me.
He says there's a finality to the decision, and I don't make it lightly.
I think if John Morant's ever questioned about anything ever again, he should respond with, all the answers are inside me. What a great, if I'm questioned about anything, that's my response. Not pleading the fifth, just all the answers are inside me. Excuse me, Mr. Withrow, what are you saying? You did it? No, I'm saying all the answers are inside me. That's what Aaron Rodgers is saying.
Do you think Brandon Marshall on his podcast there is breaking news?
No.
He's recording something in advance of whatever?
I think Brandon Marshall read a fake Twitter account or got something in a text that he just took as gospel truth and ran with it and just posted it, and now is kind of probably sitting back hoping that it comes true, that he retires. Maybe he did hear from someone that he knows would know, and he ran with it, and he's the one to break the news. Now, if it comes out in relative short order that Rodgers is in fact retiring, I will credit Brandon Marshall with breaking that story.
Like Schefter breaking the Brady
right. Now, if
retirement.
it doesn't happen or it takes a long time, I will fall back on he read a fake Twitter account or saw something, and then he clicked play on his home setup and started recording that video for Aaron Rodgers, and it got leaked. Maybe it's like, the New York Times or big newspapers will write obituaries in advance of everybody, like almost every big celebrity. They'll have obituaries and update them once they get to be a certain age. Maybe Brandon Marshall just did this offseason and it accidentally hit send on it, that he does this for everyone who might retire. He had one for J.J. Watt ready to go also. He's got one for other guys, veterans, when they retire. So
Maybe.
he has the video also had strong Stuart Smalley vibes to it from SNL, where he's just, you're great. You're smart. You're good enough. You're smart enough. It felt like a motivational speech to Aaron Rodgers, telling him it's okay to retire.
Yeah,
More so than congratulating him on a good career.
There are actually 3 decisions. It's either he stays, he's traded, or he retires. And maybe what the
But
Packers
ultimately, those answers are inside him.
Right, yeah.
We know that now, too.
Yes.
All of them.
Yeah, but maybe that's what the organization was saying. We need him all in if he's back. Maybe they're saying, like, decide if you want to play or not play for us or not. Who knows? But in regards to the drama of the offseason, we've had now multiple of these with Rodgers. He did say, if you don't like it, if you think it's drama, you think I'm being a diva or whatever, just tune it out. That's fine. But this is my life. It's important to me, and I'll make a decision soon enough. And then we'll go down that road and be really excited about it.
I can't help but love the guy. I really can't. I mean, all these statements, it's just impossible for me not to like this guy.
I want this guy in New York now.
And what he says. Oh, New York's perfect. I want to prove him wrong also, all the people. Oh, you can't handle the New York media. Give me a break. I'd love that. Also, I want Omaha Productions and Peyton Manning to license the docuseries Inside Aaron Rodgers. That's just an in-depth look at the isolation retreat, all of the things this offseason. I want a 10-part Last Dance style documentary of just Aaron Rodgers not playing football. That's what I want. Inside Aaron Rodgers, nothing about the game. Just Aaron Rodgers on vacations in Hawaii, in isolation retreats, prepping for the Pat McAfee show. That's what I want to see. Peyton Manning, Omaha Productions, please, please make this happen.
Clay Travis is about to join us, and we will get into two separate incidents that took place on the same day involving SEC storylines. On January 15th, of course, Jalen Carter, he has been arrest warrants issued, and he's not in Indianapolis. They're on their way back to Athens based on today's reporting. We'll get into that, plus Brandon Miller at Alabama. Clay joins us next on Outkick 360.
As a pitcher, there's nothing I love more. There was nothing that I relished more than a one pitch out. That was like a gift from God as a pitcher, because I had this game plan. I got to get a hitter out. I got to work this count. I got to do these things. You give me a one pitch out, and then I didn't like to face guys like you for this reason. I don't want to have to use 7, 8, 9 pitches to get an out. I don't want, and that was the Tony Gwynn thing. You had the strike zone, but you knew the strike zone. And so, my forte, you show me a guy that strikes out 100 times, I can show you a guy I can get out pretty easily because he's got holes. You show me a guy that gets on base 40% of the time, and I'm going to have a little bit of a concern. And you mentioned something that I think tails into the discussion we're going to have today. I worked quick, and so people have asked me about the pitch clock, and I said the pitch clock will never affect a pitcher that sucks, because good pitchers work fast. And if you saw Scherzer yesterday, it was hilarious. He struck a guy out who was backing out of the batter's box. I mean, but that's what we did. Tempo was part of my game. That was part of it's a weapon, and hitter, and not being able to. And I'm wondering, because you were a guy that took time in at bats. You could make a 10-pitch at bat go a while. How are hitters going to have to adjust now? You can only get out of the box one time. You got to be in the, the tempo is going to be a lot quicker. Good or bad for hitters?
Bad. I mean, look. I mean, you're talking to a guy. Okay, remember. So when I let off the game on the road, okay, at that moment in time, I controlled everything.
Right.
So when we used to play Atlanta, okay, in Atlanta, I used to take a long sweeping walk, bro, and stop right in front of Ted Turner and Jane Fonda, and stare right into Jane Fonda's eyes, and I'd say some things that I shouldn't say on here, but that was tradition, and people would be yelling, "Get in the box," and I'd be like, you know what I'd say to them.
Yep.
And you don't get voted the most hated player in the league 5 years in a row without doing these kind of things.
Right.
But I was voted the most hated player in the league because I made the other people's jobs hard.
Yep.
See, so like I say, remember our team? Like, I see you talking to the other teammate, we're fighting.
Yeah.
Like, well, we're playing for real money here.
Right.
Like, and the thing about it is, and that's why when you pitched, you were so prepared and took it so serious, it carried out to the field too. Don't forget, when you're out there in the field and you got a guy, I don't want to use people's names.
Guy going 3-2 on everybody, and no, I get that, and that was part of that too, Lenny. I learned on that team because it was a veteran team, and I was a younger guy. Listen, when we're playing in St. Louis and it's 165 degrees on the turf, I need to get my players off the field. And so that became because I always wanted, and as I got older and became more in charge of my defense, I always wanted guys invested in the day I pitched.
Outkick 360 rolls on across the Outkick network. Glad you're with us. Hutton and Withrow, 6th and Peabody, Yeehaw Beer, Old Smoky Moonshine. Joined by Clay Travis, who joins us weekly at this time. Clay, any coincidence that on the day that Jalen Carter is scheduled to meet with the media in Indianapolis, that the misdemeanor charges and the arrest warrant head his way from Athens?
I mean, that doesn't feel like a coincidence, right? I don't know if they were hoping that maybe he would meet with the media and address those allegations, which would then be usable in some way against him, right? I would be curious to know what their game plan was in that. But, yeah, I don't think it's coincidental. And, again, the only thing I can think of, directly off the top of my head associated with that is, given the fact that he was scheduled to talk to the media, maybe he would answer a question associated with that. It would then lead to a statement that they could use in some way.
What do you think when you hear this story, Clay? It's one that was surprising when I first read about it, and we discussed it earlier. It could carry a 12-month jail sentence, basically, with these two charges, but I don't see that happening. So if you're an NFL GM looking into Jalen Carter, what are the questions you have about this? How could this affect his draft status?
I mean, I think you want to know what the story is, but I always look at, best case, worst case, right? And that goes for all facets if you're drafting. Again, I haven't read the statutes that are in play. You're telling me, the max charges that he could face based on what's going on here. Presuming that that's true, I wouldn't think that it would massively impact his overall standing. Again, because it's not something where there's something hanging out there that's an uncertainty, right? Remember, Jameis Winston went number 1 overall after he had been accused of sexual assault, and you knew that lawsuit was still pending. They just gave NFL teams the Cleveland Browns did, Deshaun Watson the most guaranteed money in the history of football, and 30 different women accused him of sexual assault. So based on what I have seen from these allegations so far and these charges that have been brought against him, I wouldn't think it's something, this is not Henry Ruggs, right? This is not some situation where potentially you're going to have a player who is unable to play for years, or there's some uncertainty about his availability to ever play again. So I wouldn't think, look, will it knock him down? Probably several slots in the first round. Yes. But if you loved him at 5, I don't know why somebody wouldn't take him at 10 or 11. I don't think it's going to be some sort of massive change based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I'm with you, Clay. This is the league that did suspend Terrell Pryor for tattoos and selling championship rings.
Now to be fair, they seem to have basically kind of stepped back from that era of extreme punishment in the NFL. Doesn't mean that there's still not a risk associated with it and all those factors, but I think the Roger Goodell who suspended Terrell Pryor recognizes that was probably not what the NFL should be doing. And doesn't mean there might not be consequences. But I would be surprised if they are severe in terms of NFL future based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, and maybe the biggest consequence is going to be the salary. Just looking through what's slotted, number 1 overall gets $41 million. If he fell to like 8th, it's $23 million in the contract guarantees. If he went to 14, it drops all the way down to $17 million. There's a big gap in money from where he was originally put for, mock draft purposes compared to what could happen, which we, of course, don't know how teams feel about all this.
Yeah, right. And remember, I mean, teams are actually, I would say, more comfortable when they've got months to figure out a story than, the NFL is like its own reality show. But you'll remember, for instance, the Michael Orr smoking weed in a gas mask video that came down like 2 hours before the NFL draft, if I remember.
Yes.
And what usually
images burned in my head now.
Yeah. What usually makes NFL teams, leery is uncertainty, and that can be uncertainty from a, off the field criminal matter. It can be uncertainty from a, hey, is this guy's knee or shoulder or something going to check out for our doctors? And it can be uncertainty, i.e. something happens right up against the NFL, like the Michael Orr situation. And those are things certainly that teams are apprehensive surrounding.
And then not Orr, but Laramie Tunsil. We were following you, but it was Laramie Tunsil with the gas mask.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
And I know Michael Orr. That was a whiff on my hat.
A different
Ole
Miss,
both
different Ole Miss offensive tackle. Yeah, so it's easy to confuse
different
the two.
Ole Miss left tackle. Yeah.
So Clay, since we last talked, Nate Oates has had to apologize for a pat down intro celebration deal. Then he had to come out and further clarify it was a TSA pre-check pat down, and it was to clear for flight and takeoff. My theory is Nate Oates' opening press conferences falling on the sword about this and taking the blame and saying it's not going to happen again because there's really nothing he can say about Brandon Miller playing and the decision to play him throughout all this, but he can't explain the pat-down ritual before the game. What do you think about his latest statements?
I think all the blame should go, frankly, at this point to the University of Alabama school president because the coach and the athletic director are really just sports guys, right? I mean, and I think they should do what's right, but I understand why they want to pass the buck because the reality is they're just sports guys. And so most sports guys, I mean, look, we talk about college coaches oftentimes like they're geniuses. A lot of college coaches would otherwise be high school gym teachers if they weren't college coaches. So we're not always talking about the most intellectually brilliant members of our generation, right? And so I think them trying to reconcile and deal with the criminal justice system can be challenging. The university president of Alabama, he's the ultimate decider. I'm always, you get paid typically based on how many people you are responsible for deciding things for, as a general rule, right? The reason why a CEO makes way more money than most people at a business is because ultimately every choice sits on his desk or her desk, and they have to say yes or no, right? And so to me, this ultimately boils down to the University of Alabama president, and he is a coward and I believe a feckless buffoon for not making what should be a relatively easy decision, which is Brandon Miller shouldn't still be on the University of Alabama's team. I don't think he should still be enrolled on campus, in my opinion.
So, and to your point, Clay, Nate Oates was a high school basketball coach 10 years ago. 11 years he served as head coach at Romulus High School outside of Detroit.
I'm not trying to denigrate,
I know what you're saying.
Coaches. I'm just saying, there's a difference in what they have experienced in their lives than the criminal justice system, right? So Nate Oates is trying to figure out whether to run, man or motion or whatever on a play with 20 seconds left and a timeout. That's his skill set. Analyzing what is the appropriate line of misbehavior to determine when someone should be a member of his team or not, when it's related to a criminal justice event, is, I think, above his pay grade in terms of his knowledge. So I don't blame him for saying, hey, this should be the decision by the university. And if the university says he can play, I'll play him. It also allows him to pass the buck. But I think it's also the university president is supposed to have way more in his purview than what is Alabama going to be seeded in the NCAA tournament this year? Because by and large, whatever happens in athletics doesn't matter in particularly basketball, doesn't matter in a big way to the overall success of the university from an academic perspective. And I just come back again and again to there were 11 or 12 gunshots that were fired because Brandon Miller brought a gun to this location. If 3 or 4 Alabama students had gotten hit, God forbid 3 or 4 Alabama students had died in addition to this mom, is there any way that Brandon Miller is still enrolled? I think certainly the answer is no. So, why are you allowing him to continue to represent the university? I just think it's an embarrassment to Alabama. I think it's an embarrassment to the SEC. And frankly, I think it's an embarrassment to college basketball.
Let's carry that point about the SEC you just made, Clay Travis, on to what I'm going to ask you next. The SEC decided that Brandon Miller was not going to win SEC Freshman of the Week after averaging 32 points for the week and scoring 41, a career high, and beating South Carolina. I don't think that's a coincidence that they didn't give him SEC Freshman of the Week. Does Greg Sankey have the power to step in and suspend Brandon Miller if Alabama won't?
I don't know, because I don't believe the SEC bylaws are public, and it's been years since I was involved in looking at SEC bylaws, and I did that in the case of Cam Newton, which was obviously, for people who've forgotten, a massive story back in 2010 about whether or not Cam Newton was going to be eligible to continue to play for Auburn with all the allegations that he'd been paid. That was a huge story in the 2010 college football season. And at that point in time, the SEC, to my best of my recollection, had many of their bylaws up online. I don't think that the SEC bylaws are still up. And so I know as a general rule, the league office does not get involved in issues that individual institutions can determine because it creates, sort of the precedent of it kind of being a mess. So that's my general take. I don't know the specific power or limitations of that power that exists for the commissioner.
But isn't it more of Sankey's style to be behind the scenes in something like this? Like saying, hey, you guys should consider doing this or that and not making it public knowledge or at the forefront of the discussion?
Well, what they have avoided trying to do is creating the situation that exists in the NFL, which is where Roger Goodell is judge, jury, and executioner for much of his tenure as the NFL commissioner. And so there isn't, to my knowledge, I mean, this is sort of the argument that people have made that there needs to be an overall national commissioner of college football, for instance, who can mandate rules across multiple conferences. But yes, I mean, the general proposition is that individual schools should make decisions. And again, I don't know what the bylaws say, but if the University of Alabama president is saying, I'm not going to undertake any suspension, Brandon Miller is eligible to play for us, and then the SEC says, we don't think that he should be, then you could potentially end up in a litigation-related issue in the state of Alabama, where you're arguing over who has the authority to determine whether or not someone is eligible. Now, the NCAA, we know, certainly has the ability to determine whether somebody's eligible, but that doesn't extend to criminal-related matters to the best of my ability and knowledge.
So, Clay, the University of Tennessee lost their starting quarterback with 1 game left in the regular season that was leading a number of statistical categories when he went down with a torn ACL. Fast forward to the very next season, men's basketball, with 1 game left exactly in the regular season, they lose their starting point guard, who was leading the SEC in assists, to a torn ACL. I got to guess that's probably never happened to one school in history. And when I look at this, Clay, I can't help but think this is leading towards another Rick Barnes disappointing, heartbreaking end of the season in the NCAA tournament. What do you think?
Well, I didn't have a lot of faith that it wasn't going to be a heartbreaking early into the season result for Rick Barnes anyway, because, I mean, at some point, if you've been a college basketball coach for, what has Rick Barnes been, 35 years, your record in March is what it is. And if you never, for the most part, ever make significant runs in March, I think there's probably a reason for that. And that is, for whatever reason, Rick Barnes' teams do not perform at their apex ability level in come March. And so I don't really have a lot of faith that Tennessee was going to make a run, even if Zakai Ziegler was healthy. I think it's an awful story. and I feel bad for him. He's been through a lot. His family's house burned down. He's a beloved player, only 5'8", whatever, and that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration. And seems to be a really good kid that many people around the program are particularly fond of. But in general, I don't think that there's personally going to be a massive difference in how Tennessee does in March with or without him, just based on the history of Tennessee not doing much in March, no matter who's on the court.
Clay, you're the commissioner of the Pac-12. What decision do you make to save the conference with a TV contract that makes sense? Because what I've seen so far, the ones that make sense aren't interested in making a bid yet.
Well, I mean, that's the key, right? Ultimately, the way to keep conferences together is to convince people that you can give them more money or more security or more stability than what other options would present. And so the challenge that he has got is you've got a lot of different schools potentially with one foot out the door who are being promised better offers from either the Big 12 or the Big 10. And he's got to somehow manage to corral all those schools and keep them together for purposes of maximizing television revenue. We saw the Big 12 do this before. The Big 12 has been near death multiple times when Nebraska and Missouri and Texas A&M and Colorado and all those schools decided to bolt. The Big 12 has managed to lock itself down. Now they're losing Texas and Oklahoma, and they're still staying together. So they've had near-death experiences. I think sometimes the best way to keep people together is when they don't have options. And I think the Pac-12 schools, several of them have options that could be better. So the number one thing that the Pac-12 commissioner has to do is get a massive commitment from someone that can persuade the 10 schools that are currently there, I guess, the 10 schools that are currently there, and potentially a couple of more to come stay and join as opposed to leave for greener pastures.
Clay Travis has been our guest, of course, with Outkick, Clay and Buck Show, and much more. And by the way, great pointing out this from Davey, both Hooker
and Ziegler wear number 5.
They wear number 5.
I didn't know that was the same also.
That's nuts.
That's brutal.
Yeah. Clay, thank you, man.
Maybe don't give anybody number 5 next year.
Yeah. Retire it. Yeah.
Yeah.
See ya.
Appreciate y'all.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Clay.
Clay Travis has been our guest. Hit us up on social at Outkick 360. Coming up, we'll wrap up the show. We've got a discussion on the Frisbee dog last night that, I mean, this is
perfect analogy for Louisville basketball.
Description and visual for Louisville basketball. That's next on Outkick 360.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, whoa, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey.
Come on, live a little. Welcome into Outkick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, the bold taste of a Southern legend.
Sixth and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer, Old Smoky Moonshine. It's been a fun show today. Golden State Warriors getting back Steph Curry soon. He's missed, 9 games, a month's worth of time, returning to practice, and as long as the one-on-one practice and then the team practices go well in his return, he will be cleared to play for Golden State. Andre Iguodala has also had his fair share of injuries as of late. He joined Club Shay Shay with Shannon Sharp, and was asked about his first impression of Steph Curry.
When Steph and them got knocked out of the playoff at the play in Memphis, he said, we had some injuries. He said, but y'all better get us now because y'all not going to see us next year. He foretold of what was to come.
Yes. And I think it's funny because my first, when I signed with the Warriors 2013, and you do the press conference, you say what you're supposed to say. PC, I'm coming here to try to win a championship.
Right.
Nobody take you serious.
Right.
But I'm saying to myself, I think I've met the closest thing to Jesus Christ. Not to put that on him.
Right.
But I've never seen an individual, like he doesn't stray away from who he is in terms of who he is as a person. So you know what you get night in, night out. And I can see it. And so I'm thinking I'm about to go try to win a championship. And then we win a couple, and then he comes out and he says, y'all better get this now because we're coming back. I think y'all need to start taking Steph more serious when he's talking, because y'all just so used to him being the baby face killer, this nice kid.
Right.
You know, his faith is very strong. That faith is strong. That means that faith is real.
Yeah.
So what he's saying, he really believing. Thus far, it's all come true.
That's Andre Iguodala with Shannon Sharpe. Chad, we get an email with different stories that we want in the show, and I have no idea where this came from and why this is all of a sudden controversial with that answer.
Well, I don't know that it's controversial at all. And I'm listening to, when you hear the whole answer in context, I'm hearing it, I'm thinking when he says, you know, I feel like I've met Jesus Christ, I think I'm kind of trying to interpret someone else's mind here, so I don't know that I'm doing it well. But he's saying that, like, this guy's so good. You know, he's just a good guy. He seems completely pure in everything he does. He's the same person every single day, day in, day out. He says, I don't put that on him also. But then he goes on to say, but everybody sees him as this baby-faced, you know, killer guy, all this. And then in the locker room, he's like, they better watch out. We're going to win another one. He says, we better take this guy seriously. I guess I say all that to say no one calls Michael Jordan Jesus Christ, right? Like from just a lifestyle standpoint and the way he goes about his business. So he's always been seen as the killer and the assassin.
Oh, yes.
So it sounded to me like Iguodala saying Steph Curry became that. I don't find anything at all controversial about anything that he said and what he's saying. I don't think that, you know, he's saying
There are plenty of things to complain about with the Warriors. This is not one of them.
Yeah, I don't think he's literally saying that, you know, Steph Curry is going to die on a cross for everyone's sins.
Yeah.
When he's saying that, he's saying that's how pure this guy was. I feel like I'm dealing with Jesus Christ himself when talking with him.
Yeah, but agreed. And luckily, we just played the audio instead of a 6-second soundbite from that. Hit us up on Twitter at Outkick360. Chad, great visual description of Louisville basketball. Frisbee dogs.
It's perfect.
Look, it's perfect halftime. They're booked across the country, and you know it's an act that pleases the hundreds that were in attendance at Louisville in the recent home game. But
the hundreds and hundreds of Louisville Cardinal fans.
But as the dogs bringing the Frisbee back, instead of bringing another trip to the table, it stops and takes a huge slam on the court, and that's exactly how you describe Louisville.
Was this senior night also for them, or do they have a game at home this weekend? I don't know their schedule. Davey will find it for us and let us know. But I was thinking last night, watching some different senior nights from around, thinking, well, this pretty much sums up your senior year. If you're a senior at Louisville, I don't even know if they have seniors. That's how bad that team's been. I have not paid much attention at all. And now the question becomes is, you know, Kenny Payne's tenure as head coach at Louisville going to be a one-and-done, dog taking a dump on the court type career as a head coach at Louisville? That now is the biggest question.
Yeah, I mean, Louisville fans have to determine, do they want Coach Beard or more of this moving forward?
I mean, look, Louisville, I will make light of this.
Yeah.
Louisville stood behind Rick Pitino as long as they could.
I mean, you're right.
That guy won a national title, and he got him to Final Fours, and he is a winning, good basketball coach. That program was regularly supplying hookers to recruiting parties, okay? This was like the system at Louisville. And they stood behind Rick Pitino forever. I do not believe Louisville will have much of an issue hiring Chris Beard. I really don't.
By the way,
you can take that as a knock on Louisville. Someone's going to hire Chris Beard eventually. May not be this season, but eventually they're going to ask enough questions. They're going to feel like he served time or whatever, and he's going to get hired. Louisville's a great guess as to who may do that.
It makes
what
sense.
A great landing spot
Yeah.
for Chris Beard to have what happened with what he did.
I know.
And what happened there at Texas to go from your alma mater, Texas, to Louisville, who is a great historical basketball program. Not bad at all for him.
It was senior night, by the way. They're at Virginia on Saturday.
Perfect way to cap off the Louisville Cardinal season with a dog coming out to defecate on the court.
Deadline for the franchise tag in the NFL is next Tuesday, the 7th. The Baltimore Ravens, Eric DeCosta speaking with the media, saying that they are hopeful that they're optimistic that they can get something long-term worked out with Lamar Jackson prior to that deadline. That they have talked, both sides have talked, and they're trying to hammer out a contract. He would not go into any details about whether or not Jackson was still mandating that he gets the fully guaranteed contract or not. But if you're him, why would you give it at this point in negotiations if it's not going to be much more than what you turned down in August of last year?
Really curious to see where this goes. And if this ends up with Lamar Jackson anywhere but Baltimore, however they get this done is going to be a surprise. It'll also be quite exciting for the league if that's the direction this thing takes. Atlanta, you mentioned earlier this week, Hutton, as a possibility. If he ends up anywhere but as a Raven this year, that's going to be something to behold.
Quote from DeCosta, "We met recently. We both understand the urgency of the situation. There's been good dialogue, good discussion. I'm optimistic as I continue to be optimistic, and we'll see where it goes." It's all up to Lamar Jackson now. They can put the non-exclusive tag on him, and another team can match that offer and sign him, and then Baltimore would get 2 first-round picks in return. Or they could just give him the money the same way Cleveland gave the money to Watson. It's a saga worth watching, and it'll play out over the next 7 days. See you tomorrow on Outkick 360.